The evening started like any other, Kola hosting a small cocktail party for clients, the kind that was really a parade of status and influence. Adanna moved through the crowd with a quiet grace, her smile practiced, her eyes watching her husband from the periphery. He was laughing too loudly in the center of a group, his tailored suit a sharp contrast to her simple but elegant dress. It used to bother her, the showmanship, the flash. Now she had learned to wear it like armor, uncomplaining, unobtrusive, nearly invisible. She was in the guest room, straightening a throw pillow for a visiting client's comfort, when a familiar ringtone drifted from the hallway. It was Rena's voice, unmistakable, sharp, excited, self-assured. Adanna froze, the pillow forgotten in her hands. The voice carried through the half-open door. "Baby, you won't believe how easy it is going to be," Rena purred into the phone, her words crisp. "He's already talking about the renovations. The compound will be ready for mid-next week. Mema Kimi is over the moon. She said I'm the upgrade they've been waiting for. You'll see. Soon the whole place will have my name lit on the gate." Adanna's breath went shallow. She stepped closer, pretending to fluff the curtains, and heard Kola's laugh, a familiar warmth in the background. Then Rena said what cracked her open. "Just wait. When she leaves, I'll move in. This is what winning looks like." Silence followed. Adanna's reflection in the glass was broken into shards. The woman who had sacrificed, the quiet partner, the one who kept everything together while Kola's world sparkled on the surface. Her eyes stung. "Winning," she whispered to herself, as the party's muffled noise seemed miles away. She should have confronted him. She should have stormed the room and demanded answers. But the truth was a slow poison. It didn't need her drama. She kept standing there, her face the still water, while her insides roiled like a storm. She folded the curtains with surgical precision, her movements a mask hiding the quake beneath. Later, in the kitchen while pouring herself a glass of water, she saw the discarded champagne flutes near the service door and heard the last tail end of the call. "Don't worry, I've got it in hand. He thinks he's clever." By the time Adanna realizes, the deed will already be done. The glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered across the tiled floor, and the sound echoed like a gunshot in a space filled with laughter. No one looked over. That, more than anything, was the moment she realized the war wasn't a rumor. It was already active, and she'd been given no warning. The next morning, Adanna woke before sunrise. Dreams of the previous night's exchange clung to her like humidity. Kola walked in carrying a tablet, an unreadable expression. His eyes softened when they met hers, and she braced, because love, lately, had become a performance they both knew how to play. "Morning," he said, casually, flipping through financial graphs that meant little to her now. "Morning," she replied, voice even. "You've got a meeting with the Lagos Investment Group today, right?" He nodded. "Yeah. After that, I'll swing by the office. You okay? You look tired." She considered telling him the truth. That she'd heard the phone call. That she had seen the future unraveling. Instead, she smiled lightly. "Just the usual. I'll be fine." It was after his meeting, mid-afternoon, when chaos arrived in elegant heels. Rena glided into the compound like a new queen entering conquered territory. Bright smile, 2 white teeth, a dress that whispered "look at me" with every step. Mema Kimi was right behind her, clutching a folder, her eyes already surveying the space like a woman choosing which room to pawn off next season's gossip. "Adanna!" Mema Kimi called, so sharp that even the house seemed to flinch. "Pack your things. It's time you moved on." "What?" Adanna's breath snagged. "Moved on from what?" Mema Kimi's lips curled. "This isn't up for debate. Kola has already made the arrangements. You've been here a long time, longer than the house deserves." Adanna stepped forward. "Mama, wait. I'm your daughter-in-law. You can't just take up space anymore." Rena's voice was velvet wrapped around a knife. "You've been obsolete for a while. Now it's time for fresh energy." Kola appeared at the doorway like a man who'd rehearsed this in front of a mirror. His face was calm, practiced. Adanna, I've arranged for you to have some money. It's not much, but it'll hold you for a bit. He handed her a small, thin envelope. Inside, there was 50,000 Nigerian nairas, folded like it was a favor being done, not a betrayal being justified. You'll be fine, he said, as if offering charity. You have skills. Tommy's been saying good things. This is a fresh start. She stared at the money as if it could bone her. The humiliation didn't come from being forced out. It came from how casually they did it, like clearing a table after the main course was done. She picked up a small travel bag from the closet, the one she had packed for weekend stays to calm his nerves during quarterly stress. The irony wasn't lost on her. She left, not with a scream, but with quiet dignity folded tightly into her spine. Tommy's apartment was 2 subway stops away. He opened the door before she knocked. He saw her, took in the envelope, the tiredness etched deeper than any makeup could hide. They did it quickly, he said softly, ushering her in. They threw you out like scraps. You okay? Adanna sat at the small dining table, her fingers tracing the mark on the envelope where his name was barely visible. I heard everything, Tommy, she said. They didn't even wait for me to respond. They think silence is weakness, Tommy replied. They are about to find out it was patience. You don't have to say anything yet. We'll plan. You'll let them show their hand. She let the tears come then, not from pain, but from the sharp clarity of betrayal. I never thought I'd leave my own home like that, she murmured. With an envelope and a hello, you'll be fine. Tommy put a hand on Hayes. You won't just be fine. You'll be the one writing the next chapter. But first, we breathe. Then we move. Words slid through the city like oil, quiet, slick, and impossible to scrub. The blogs picked up the whisper, Adanna Okafor seen leaving husband's estate with minimal belongings. Social media comment sections filled with gossip. Some sympathetic, most indulgent in spectacle. Kola's PR team said nothing. Silence was their strategy, and silence gave the rumor life. Adanna didn't have time to read any of it. She was too busy being present in the only place that felt like temporary safety, Tommy's apartment. His living room was a mismatch of old diplomas, a second-hand bookshelf, and a large plant that had survived 3 moves. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and worn paper, a world away from the antiseptic grandeur she had left behind. You don't want to go back, Tommy said one evening, pouring 2 cups of tea. They've already started the narrative. They are framing you as the problem. Rena's out there smiling, and they'll make sure everyone believes the story. Adanna looked out the window toward the city lights. Everyone thinks they know me because of the way the news frames it. But none of them know I can design a building that makes multimillionaires weep when they see it. None of them know the late nights, the quiet research, the ideas I buried because it wasn't glamorous. It's time to dig them back out, Tommy said. You have the vision. You just haven't had the platform. Uche Nwosu is a quiet name in the background of a lot of Lagos real estate moves. He doesn't talk loud, but he listens to the right people. I can introduce you. Adanna's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with calculation. Introduce me as what? The woman who was kicked out. The woman they'll write off as bitter. As the woman who was the real architect of many dreams you've seen floating around, Tommy answered. You do the work. I'll make sure it's seen. You want revenge? Fine. But make it a masterpiece. Anger fades, but legacy sticks. She opened her laptop. The screen lit up her face, the way moonlight would if it could speak. She pulled up old sketch files, design plans from when she was in school, and the notes she had hidden in a password-protected folder, concepts for community luxury hybrid living spaces that combined elegance with unexpected kindness. Her mind started mapping, not to retaliate with noise, but to build something so substantial it would eclipse the gossip and the shame. I don't want scandal, she said. I want transformation. I want something that shows them that the woman they discarded built the world they are still trying to live in. You'll get it, Tommy replied. And when you do it, they'll have no fight left in them but to watch. The introduction was quiet. Uche Nwosu was not a man who did loud entrances or flashy announcements. He was the kind of figure that existed in the background of major property deals, seen in boardroom photographs with his hand resting lightly on a model of a future skyline. Tommy arranged a lunch at a private bistro in Lekki, where the table had a view of construction cranes humming like tired beasts in the distance. Uche arrived late, calm, an aura of a man who didn't chase but had people chase him. Adanna felt the weight of his gaze, not piercing, but assessing, like a sculpture being examined for possibility. "You're Adanna," he said simply, sitting without ceremony. "Tommy speaks highly. He says you have ideas but no stage. I say you have precision but no audience." She nodded. "I have both. I just haven't had a partner who sees the value beyond surface headlines." He leaned back. "What do you build when no one is watching?" "Spaces that look like quiet power," she answered. "Homes that feel like dignity. Places where people don't have to choose between comfort and identity. I've got concepts for a mini community, modular, easily scalable, designed for women of influence who were told they didn't belong in elite spaces." He didn't flinch. He asked, "And why now?" "Because sometimes the people who push you out don't realize they've cleared the path for you to build the road they can't walk on anymore." Her voice was steady, the calm of someone who had watched herself fall apart and had decided to rebuild it so magnificently no one could ignore her. Uche held her gaze a second longer, then smiled. "I like the quiet thunder. I'll fund the prototype. But here's the condition. I want it to carry your name, not mine. I want you to own the narrative, not the facade." Adanna's shock was small and brief. "I'm not looking for charity." "This isn't charity," Uche replied. "This is strategic. You get equity. I get to see something real manifest. Lagos needs more than houses. It needs stories that rebuild what was broken. I'm putting in seed money. You get creative control. You bring the designs, the team, the voice. We split the retains, but the blueprint goes to you." She exhaled. For the first time since the truth was revealed, her breath felt like a beginning instead of an ending. "Then let's draw something that makes them remember why they feared you," she said. Word traveled faster than expected. Adanna's early renders for the mini-estate started circulating to a few elite circles thanks to Tommy's quiet network. Her designs were being admired in private chats. Who is the mind behind that kind of elegance without brashness? But the public narrative still had hoe in the gutter. Meanwhile, in the old compound, Rena made her presence a spectacle. She held a welcome reception in the main hall, dripping in expensive makeup and a dress that glinted like broken glass. There was a video posted by a social influencer showing her walking through the gate now tagged with her name in faux gold letters. "The new queen of the Okafor compound." The caption read, complete with laughing emojis and backhanded compliments. Muma Kimi filmed a short clip, her voice high and celebratory. "Change is here. Adanna was a chapter. Rena is the whole book. You see elegance? You see energy? This is what a family upgrade looks like." Rena took the camera, waving it for effect. "I'm not here to hate. I'm here to elevate. You know what they say, new blood, new blessings. We don't do leftovers. We do first course." But the cracks were already forming in her performance. Kola, who had initially basked in the illusion of control, now watched from the sidelines. The lavish life creaked under hidden debts and whispered legal threats from an old fraud investigation that had begun to resurface. Rena's smile flickered on screen when the first notice arrived from a bank regulator. The public didn't see it. They only saw her parading through a space that once belonged to someone who had built a quiet kind of empire. Back in Tommy's apartment, Adanna watched a leaked clip of Rena's reception. She didn't react with glee. She absorbed. She paused the video, rewound it, and zoomed on the gate's nameplate. Cheap imitation. Too loud. out of place with the original architecture. She smiled faintly. "Tommy," she said, "they are busy decorating a house that's already on a sinking foundation. I want the prototype to launch quietly. No announcements. Let the first people who walk in feel like they found something sacred, not something advertised." "And the internet?" Tommy asked. "They'll want a story. They'll want drama. Let them have the drama on their feeds. We'll put substance in front of their eyes." She closed the laptop. "When the eviction notice goes out, it won't be the loudness that shocks them. It'll be the fact that the woman they cast aside now owns the stage, and they are performing under her spotlight." The rhythm of Adanna's days had shifted. Where before she had been buffeted by humiliation and displacement, now she was building something. The prototype project with Uche had become her private crucible, the place where she forged the next version of herself. The tiny lot they'd chosen sat between two aging buildings in a part of Lagos that was on the brink. Not yet polished luxury, not yet forgotten decay. It had bones, light, and possibility. Adanna saw, where others saw empty space, a sanctuary, quiet power. She'd called it to Uche. The blueprint stretched across her table in Tommy's makeshift war room, now also doubling as her design studio. There were sketches layered over mood boards, notes about sustainable materials, communal lounges that doubled as mentorship pods, and private units with reflection nooks hidden from the outside gaze, rooms where women could sit without posturing, where success didn't have to shout. Tommy dropped a stack of market analysis reports beside her while sipping bitter coffee. "People are already asking who's behind this," he said. "Word travels faster when it's smart. We could leak a little, just enough to get eyes, not enough to invite vultures." Adanna traced the edge of a drawing of the central courtyard, a narrow vertical garden where indigenous plants filtered city noise, a subtle water feature whose trickle made the space feel both alive and calm. "I don't want this to look like revenge," she said. "I want it to feel like a rebirth. The people who were watching me fall will see this and realize I didn't break, I recreated." Tommy nodded. "Rebirth works better than retaliation. The internet loves a phoenix." A soft chime came from her phone. It was a message from Uche. "Progress? Meet tomorrow. I've arranged a private viewing with a small group. Let's see if the prototype breathes the way the drawings do." She stayed at the message, then at the blueprint again. "They'll think I built it overnight," she murmured. The next day, Uche brought a few quiet but influential women, some with titles that read like power in Lagos, others who built empires in silence. They wandered the developing space, their shoes stirring dust, their phones tucked away less frequently than many would expect. Adanna walked them through the concept, not with boasting, but with stories. "This isn't just buildings," she said softly. "This is where someone like you could come in after being told you don't belong. This is where your boardroom sweat dries in peace. This is where the woman who was made to feel small can host a salon and find the people who see her." One of the women, a media magnate who had grown up with her own share of being overlooked, stopped at the reflection nook. "You made a place for silence," she said, "and gave it a voice." Later that evening, Tommy slid a text across the table. "They are already whispering. Who is the mind behind Silent Haven?" He grinned. "We're not leaking. They are discovering." Adanna allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, but it was tempered. She still saw the headlines in her mind. Rena's stage parades, Mama Kimi's celebratory posts, Cola's smug silence. The blueprint had to turn into more than admiration. It had to convert into real leverage. She stayed up late that night, sketching the next phase. She added a community sponsorship model. Successful residents could mentor newcomers. Part of the rental income would seed scholarships for women displaced from abusive marriage dynamics. She titled the core building The Silent Window, a place where the world could be observed, but the occupant remained undisturbed. Tommy caught her scribbling new structural outlines. "You're already on chapter 10 of this, and we haven't even published a single post," he said. "You don't need to shout," she replied. "I want curiosity. I want them to look at this and feel like they stumbled on something real, not something dramatized. The eviction will be loud enough. This will be the story they keep coming back to. The transformation wasn't in the clothes, though they were sharper now. It wasn't in a sudden flash of wealth, either. Adanna still kept the same humility in her movements. The glow-up was in the way people started seeing. Her name moved from whispers into tagged praise without her asking for it. Influential women began sending messages. Who designed that lounge space? So intimate, so confident. Her followers increased, not because she flashed misery, but because she shared the quiet journey. A before and after reel of the prototype's progress, with no faces, just hand sketching and spaces evolving, went viral among Lagos micro-influencers. They called it elegance without applause. Rena, on the other hand, had started making more public appearances, trying to fan the image of the upgrade, dressed in ostentatious silks, laughing too loudly at events that mattered, posting slow-motion videos of her lifestyle. Her wardrobe was new, her energy forced. Adanna saw her in passes, on billboards that had her face plastered with new era captions, in interviews where she spoke about finally bringing vision to the Okafor legacy. The cracks were there, faint but present, an unsteady laugh, a pause when a payment reminder from the bank popped on her phone, a tightened smile when Mama Kimi asked for more than flattery. Adanna's own appearance underwent a quieter shift. She accepted a discreet invitation to speak at a private interior design circle. No one expected the woman who'd been thrown out to show up. She arrived in a minimalist outfit, dark blouse, tailored trousers, hair pulled back, but her presence filled the room. When she spoke about purpose-driven architecture, she didn't mention betrayal. She spoke about foundation. You can build grand spaces, but if the soul isn't anchored, the structure collapses inward. Afterward, women came up to her. You've done something with the idea of space that feels like comfort for tired ambition, one whispered. A younger designer confided, I was about to give up. I saw your prototype. I want to be part of building something like that. Tommy watched the ripple effects with a half smile. They are calling you Silent Thunder now, he said, sliding a voice note across. One of the lifestyle vloggers said you don't need to shout to be heard. Adanna clicked play. Good, she said. Let the thunder roll under the radar. They'll think it's just noise until it becomes the only sound they recognize. She also allowed herself small celebrations. A new tailored blazer. A quiet dinner with Uche that wasn't about business. She was reclaiming luxury on her own terms, without the need to show off, only to exist as an undeniable presence. The world has a way of magnifying cracks when people are already balanced on unstable foundations. Kola had been running on borrowed prestige. His lifestyle was a veneer of power propped up by loopholes, manipulation, and a network of financial maneuvers that now began to show signs of wear. Late nights at the bank had become more desperate. His calls, once commanding, were now peppered with urgency. He brushed off the rumors. Rena, meanwhile, doubled down, faking confidence while preparing for whatever the next show required. The first public sign of trouble wasn't a headline. It was a quiet visit from a private investigator to one of Kola's closest associates, asking questions about unusual transfers and compliance irregularities. The associate, nervous, fed back what he could, and word reached Mama Kimi, who waved it away as nothing but noise from jealous competitors. Adanna, who had kept her ear in the right rooms while staying outwardly distant, heard the whispers. Kola's been flagged, a mutual contact told Tommy in a hushed conversation. There's a freeze pending if they don't explain some offshore movement. The audit's coming. Tommy relayed it to Adanna without dramatics. It's not public yet, but it's happening. She leaned back. The satisfaction was not in schadenfreude. It was in watching the house of cards built on spectacle wobble because the foundation had never been solid. Let it wobble, she said. We don't push. Gravity does the rest. Rena, sensing the tremor, started planning contingency publicity, an emergency empowerment photoshoot, speeches about loyalty and the strength of standing beside a man during crisis. The irony wasn't lost on Adanna. The same woman who had built her persona on being the upgrade now had to scramble to cover for the collapse happening behind the scenes. The first official announcement came subtly, a freeze notice. Cola's bank account, the one that paid for lavish showcases and private parties, had been flagged for a pending inquiry related to fraud detection. The firm he'd been using to funnel investment opportunities was under review. His pride, image, and access began shrinking in real time. In the background, Adanna's prototype had made its first soft launch. A small cadre of women moved in for the pilot. They were told the space was an invite-only creative residency, no mention of the story. They posted genuine, appreciative content. A home where my ambition doesn't feel guilty, one captioned, unaware of the drama across town. Cola tried to reach Adanna through mutual acquaintances, masked as business advice. She didn't respond. He sent a message asking for a meeting. She read it, then archived it. Rena, in desperation, showed up at Mama Kimi's house in tears. "He's going to lose it all," she whispered, mascara smeared from the frantic day. Mama Kimi, who had always stood on the side of outward appearances, now had to confront the possibility that her upgrade was not only unstable, she was sliding. The public would later see Rena's attempts to project strength as a flailing with more filters. The ones who had been destined to ride her wave subtly distanced themselves, not wanting to be caught in the upcoming fall. Adanna didn't gloat. She kept building. Because the real power wasn't in the exposure of their downfall. It was in showing that something else, something grounded, was rising while the noise faded. Desperation warps even the most rehearsed facades. With Cola's financial unraveling beginning to leak into Rena's carefully curated world, she clung to the only leverage she believed she still had, Cola's image, the perception of power, and the illusion of lineage. She started loudly hinting in public appearances that she was expecting a new chapter. Blonde-tipped influencers shared her pregnancy glow selfies. Mama Kimi posted celebratory teasers. Our family expands again. Love and legacy continue. The whispers started, is Rena pregnant? And is this the heir they kept secret? Adanna saw the posts. The timing was too theatrical to be organic. And when the lavish baby shower invitations began circulating, complete with branded cake toppers and a coming soon countdown, Tummy sent a single voice note, "This is a move, right? Or a full cover-up?" Adanna didn't respond immediately. She observed. Then she called a nice friend, Ephema, who worked quietly in one of the top private clinics. "I need a favor," Adanna said carefully. "Have you heard anything unusual in the gossip streams? Specifically someone faking a pregnancy for attention?" Ephema hesitated a beat, then agreed to look into her own network. A week passed. Rena's staged maternity photos rolled out, each more dramatic than the last. She held her belly as if it was proof of conquest. "You can't take this from me," she told the cameras in an interview. "You can't take my child. He's the legacy." But the moment of fragility came when Ephema, discreetly, sent a secure note to Adanna. "No baby. Tests show hormonally induced symptoms. She's paying for a false positive. If you want to expose it, do so in a way that doesn't look like vendetta. Let the truth set the record straight." Adanna's mind spun, not on the idea of public humiliation, but on timing, context, and consequence. This was a weapon, but weapons used poorly turned against the wielder. She arranged a subtle frame. A documentary-style piece was not launched by her. Instead, she seeded the truth through a mutual female journalist who had been quietly profiling women who rebuilt after betrayal. The journalist, while researching, encountered the fake pregnancy's inconsistencies, a midwife source who'd seen Rena pay for elaborate private staging, a pregnancy announcement whose medical documents didn't align with standard hospital procedures, whispers from staff who had seen the blood tests being manipulated. The story broke not as an attack from Adanna, but as an investigative piece titled, "When Image Overrides Integrity, the High Cost of Staged Legacies." In it, the reporter displayed the pattern, how Rina had used illusion to anchor her status, how the fake pregnancy narrative was a desperate attempt to anchor herself to something bigger than collapsing finance, and how the people around her, including Mama Kimi, had amplified it without due diligence. The comments erupted. Some sympathized. Her story was complicated. Many mocked. A fake pregnancy to cover a failing empire. The video of Rina's earlier announcement interviews played back with a different lens. Her tearful vow to protect her child now looked like performance art. Mima Kimi, in public, tried to pivot. "Every woman deserves support," she said on a morning show. But the damage wasn't in the statement. It was in the cognitive dissonance. The same woman who had championed Rina's upgrade now had to defend the authenticity of the miracle. Cola's reaction was muted. He was beginning to realize how much of their power had been built on borrowed facades and borrowed personas. Rina's public meltdown, when she was confronted with evidence, was explosive. She blamed haters and people trying to take family joy, yet her credibility thinned with each statement. Adanna watched the collapse, unflinching. She didn't celebrate publicly. She allowed the story to settle like dust, then started redirecting conversation, offering subtle interviews that talked about women rebuilding their lives on real foundations, speaking about authenticity, resilience, and the illusion of quick fixes. The world saw Rina's empire wobble again. This time not from outside forces, but from the emptiness of a narrative built on falsehood. It should have been a quiet day. The sun rose pale over Lagos, casting long shadows on the compound that had once been Adanna's home. Inside, Rina was on another appearance tour, trying to salvage image. Mema Kimi was in the garden, preening for a local magazine's family legacy feature. Kola was in his study, trying to patch leaks quietly as suspicions and audits stacked around him like unread legal documents. Meanwhile, a brown envelope, simple, respectful, and official, was placed gently on the front gate. The gate, now sporting Rina's flashy nameplate, had new brass letters that glinted uncomfortably in the sun. The envelope's seal carried no theatrics. It contained a document that would make global murmurs, an eviction notice. Adanna had not shouted it. There were no viral teasers, no dramatic video rollouts. The notice arrived like a declaration of inevitability. It read, in crisp legal language, notice of ownership transfer and demand for vacatur. The old estate had been quietly purchased by Uche, in Adanna's name, months earlier, under the guise of a legacy restoration acquisition. The correspondence was handled by Adanna's legal team, headed by Tommy, whose calm efficiency masked the firestorm about to unfurl. Kola was the first to find it. He opened the front door, saw the envelope on the mat, and his face drained. Mima Kimi ran outside, her lipstick smudging as she read. Rina's assistant, arriving late, held the camera for her influencer reel, but froze when she saw the group clustered at the gate. Eviction. Rina said, voice high. You can't do that. That's our home. It is not. Tommy's voice said from the threshold, and all eyes turned. He had arrived with the proper documentation. Ownership transferred. All prior claims have been cleared. The compound was purchased legally. You've been given 14 days to vacate. Kola stepped forward, anger fighting with embarrassment. This is fraud. Who sold it? I. The transaction went through months ago, Tommy said, calmly. The deed is complete. Adanna owns it. The eviction notice is valid. You have 2 weeks. Rina raised her voice, launching into a spectacle. This is revenge. This is karma. She was the one thrown out first. How can she own what was taken from her? She turned to a nearby influencer. Record this. People need to see what silent bitterness looks like. The gate burst open, not with force, but with the presence of a new era. The compound echoed with murmurs from the street. The neighbors, who had once whispered about Adanna's departure, now watched the reversal. The eviction didn't come with a cheering crowd. It came with the quiet sound of documents being read, of phones discreetly recording, of those who had been complicit suddenly finding their optics complicated. Rena screamed for legal help. Kola threatened to sue. Mima Kimi clutched her pearls like armor. But the papers were impeccable, the transfer, the timestamp, the financing trail from Uche's investment arm to Adanna's name. No loopholes. No theatrics left to manipulate. Adanna watched it unfold from a distance. She didn't arrive at the gate. She didn't make a statement. She sat in the prototype small community lounge, watching the news cycle begin to turn. Clips of Rena's meltdown, headlines about the quiet wife who bought her old mansion, commentary from pundits who tried to frame it as poetic justice or social media spectacle. Tommy sent a single message. They have 14 days. You want to say something? She typed, let their noise fill the void while we build. Then she stood, walked to the reflection nook in the lounge, and looked at herself in the mirror, not as the girl who had been shoved onto the street with an envelope, but as the woman who now held the keys to the place that once defined her. She touched the glass. The reflection smiled back quietly. The eviction notice hadn't exploded into the typical social media frenzy of memes and performative outrage. Adanna had been too careful for that. Instead, it arrived like a cold, undeniable truth. The compound's ornate gate, once a symbol of Cola's curated success and Rena's faux glam takeover, now bore the silent dread of impending displacement. Rena's reaction was immediate and theatrical. The morning air carried her screams like a storm warning. She stormed the compound grounds with a silk robe fluttering behind her, followed by a live streamer and a circle of influencers desperate to capture the breaking moment. Mima Kimi appeared with trembling lips, clutching a designer handkerchief, as if the humiliation could be blotted away with a fold of fabric. You can't do this. Rena yelled, her voice shrill enough to cut through polite neighbors' whispered gossip. This is my home. This is my family's legacy. Who sold it? Who gave it to her? Tommy arrived just behind the legal team, quiet, composed, and stepped into the open courtyard. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The clip of him presenting the clean, stamped deed to the astonished onlookers was already going to be replayed in evenings across Lagos. You were given notice, he said simply, to no one in particular, and the law backs the transfo. The 14-day period is non-negotiable. We expect compliance. Kola, who had once been the one to hand Adanna the envelope and dismissal, now stood shell-shocked, the thin veneer of control peeling in real time. He tried to marshal outrage. This is manipulation. This is a setup. But his words sounded hollow against the authenticity of the documents and the unflinching calm of Tommy. Mema Kimi, grasping for something that resembled authority, attempted to go on television right from the front steps, claiming, this is a witch hunt. Adanna is using tactics. She's trying to ruin a family. It was a weak defense. The visuals betrayed her. Her own body language said she was cornered. Neighbors had gathered by the street. Some whispered, recalling how the same gate had once held Adanna's name in quiet dignity. Others recorded Rena's meltdown, her mascara smeared from the stress, her exaggerated gestures, her cries of betrayal, while discreetly taking in the entourage of women moving into the prototype space across town, being posted about under completely different hashtags: real restoration, women building women, legacy without drama. Adanna didn't appear. She remained absent from the site, the owner's seat taken by presence and not dramatic public scenes. Her silence created a vacuum that magnified everything happening in the compound. Her absence was intentional, a contrast to the chaos erupting where she was supposed to have once been powerless. On the 5th day, a small group of journalists arrived, some invited under the pretense of covering the eviction, others drawn by the strange, understated power of the story. They interviewed the earlier tenants, captured Rena raging, Mama Kimi deflecting, and Kolo attempting rationality. None had the raw angle of Adanna herself. Instead, they documented her strategy, reclaiming not with spectacle, but with ironclad process. The most viral quote wasn't from her, it was from a neighbor who muttered, "She was thrown out like trash, and now she's the one dictating who stays." That's a story we didn't see coming. The public discourse shifted. Terms like silent power, quiet revenge, and ownership without yelling trended in circles that usually favored loud spectacle. People were drawn less to the drama and more to the contrast. The woman without a public meltdown now held the key to the house where the noise erupted. Rena's public emotion turned from performative to unstable. In a desperate attempt, she hired a PR team to spin the narrative. She's a daughter-in-law who was wronged. Adanna is the one trying to take their home back. The video, however, only amplified laughter from social commentators who had already seen the tide turn. The white envelope that had once symbolized her dismissal now symbolized a move so quiet it rendered the loud cries powerless. Tommy sent Adanna a short voice note. Gates chaos. They're using every angle. The world's watching the meltdown. We're building the foundation. She replied, let them make noise. Sound fades. Property and credibility doesn't. Silent Thunder was no longer just a nickname whispered among insiders. The moniker exploded across platforms, not from a single orchestrated post, but from a cascade of organic reactions. Video compilations of her transformation juxtaposed with the chaos at her old compound were shared under the tagline, "She was thrown out like trash, then bought the house." The algorithm couldn't help it. The story had the irresistible pull of dramatic irony, the discarded woman now owning the space through method, while the betrayer screamed in public, impotent and exposed. The clip that pushed it into a full-blown internet phenomenon was simple. A 3-minute montage showing the prior state of the compound, quick flashes of Rena's staged lifestyle, Mama Kimi's declarations of upgrade, and then the calm arrival of the eviction notice, followed by a split screen of Adanna's prototype, soft lighting, women working quietly, a small child being led through the reflection nook, and a voiceover of Adanna's earlier interview about real foundations. The narrative was shareable because it didn't feel crafted. It felt like truth presented with cinematic contrast. Commentary videos from influencers with millions of followers dissected the difference between noise and legacy. Podcasts debated the ethics of revenge, with most hosts grudgingly admitting she didn't seek pity. She built leverage. That's what makes her story sticky. Brands began quoting her transformation as a case study. Companies that had been making noise in the marketplace were suddenly asked privately, "What's your foundation? Is your brand built to last? Or is it just performance?" Young women shared their own stories, using the hashtag #SilentThunder, talking about times they were sidelined and how they were quietly building their returns. The clickbait articles tried to oversimplify, from trash to title deed, how the forgotten wife became queen, the silent woman who made Lagos watch. Adanna didn't respond to those. Instead, she released a short piece, no viral headline, simply a modest email newsletter to early supporters and surrogate voices that had lifted her design work. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet room where the truth gets built. The public fell in love with the undercurrent. The drama at the old compound provided the spark. Her story gave the fire its warmth. People began sending her messages, not begging, but offering. One young architect wrote, "Your work inspired me to reopen my own abandoned studio." A woman who'd exited a toxic marriage sent a voice note, "I watched you rebuild. I'm reclaiming my own life and space." Rena's online energy now tried to pivot into victimhood. "They are attacking me because I was the one chosen," she posted, but the sincerity was gone. The same audience that had once been dazzled by her brand had started questioning the stability behind it. The eviction clip had already been memed in a way her PR team couldn't sanitize. Rena's tantrum next to a calm voiceover quoting Adanna's phrase, "Let their noise fill the void while we build." Mima Kimi was uneasy. The social pressure had shifted her from the mother of the upgrade to someone who had been publicly aligned with a facade. Private messages poured in from longtime acquaintances. "You might want to reconsider your public alignment." She tried to control the narrative with a half-hearted apology. "I was misled." But the internet doesn't easily forgive when it senses insincerity. Her followership dropped subtly. Invitations to family legacy events dwindled. Her status, which had thrived on her ability to be seen as the gatekeeper of taste, threatened expansion. Adanna's name, however, became shorthand for a different kind of aspiration, a brand not built on being seen, but on being remembered. Yet she remained careful, consciously avoiding the trap of spectacle. She understood the fragility of hype and the permanence of structure. Tommy sent a message: "We ride the wave, then shift to the next level." They think eviction was the climax. The real story is still unfolding. She typed back, "Make the next phase quieter. Those who are supposed to be there already know where to find us." The invitation came from a women's empowerment platform that had hold of her through a friend of a mentor. They wanted her on the show, not to talk trash, but to speak candidly about rebuilding in power. The host, known for interviewing women who had navigated public disgrace and emerged with a mission, introduced her not as a victim, but as a strategist. Adanna arrived in serene confidence. No dramatic entrance. No mention of the eviction at the start. She began with a story. "I was told that silence meant submission," she said, to a studio full of cameras and a live global stream. But silence, when used with intention, is not the absence of voice, it's the moment before clarity. "I was thrown out with an envelope and a narrative. I didn't need to scream to be heard. I needed a blueprint." The host leaned forward. "You didn't just come back," she said. "You flipped the entire stage." "I built the stage," Adanna replied, "and invited others to stand on it." She talked about fidelity, not just marital, but to one's own values. She spoke about how society often rewards the loud and vilifies the quiet breakdowns. She shared how the fake pregnancy, the staged upgrade, and the house takeover had been distractions from the real truth, that someone who had been pushed to the edge could choose to build a space where others could rest without performing. The interview struck a chord. Her calm recounting of humiliation, stripped of self-pity, gave the audience room to feel both anger and inspiration. Her moment wasn't a shout, it was a quiet, heavy landing that reverberated. The clip of her saying, "They gave me nothing but a story. I gave myself a foundation," was shared in private groups, aspirational chats, and even among young entrepreneurs who had not yet been betrayed but feared being dismissed. Adanna was asked about her relationship with Kola, with Rina, with Mimakimi. She didn't drag them into mud. She said, "People show their true colors when you allow their actions to speak louder than their titles. I've moved on from expecting apologies. I built instead." The show ended with a surprise. Uche appeared on screen virtually to commend her. He praised the model, not just the architecture, but the socio-cultural design of helping other women access power without asking permission. "Adanna didn't just change a building," he said. "She changed the definition of what ownership looks like for women who have been told they don't fit the mold." The interview gave language to her movement. Commentators dissected it: quiet dominance, rebranding pain into platform, how Lagos learned to listen. The fans she had already built felt validated. New audiences emerged: international business circles, diaspora groups, and women's leadership networks. After the show, a young woman approached her backstage. "I was going to give up my design degree," she said, tears in her eyes. "You made me believe I can build value without compromising myself." Adanna hugged her. "Start with the foundation," she whispered. "The rest follows." Rina's fall was no longer an abstract threat. It was being lived in real time. The social media narrative had morphed from envy to cautionary tale. The same people who had once reposted her upgrade stories now whispered behind her back. Influencers turned their cameras away from her and toward Adanna's projects. One afternoon, a video went viral. Rina, in plain clothes, no makeup, trying to navigate a discount boutique where she was now working as a temporary brand ambassador, her designer pieces long gone. A customer recognized her, and cameras captured the moment her stoic mask cracked. She tucked her face away as if the lenses could bite. The boutique clip circulated with the caption, "From Queen of the Compound to Counting Hangers." The video was merciless. Barber Street-side comedians made sketches of her new life, while analysis pieces debated how quickly an image without substance erodes. Mema Kimi, who had once strutted beside her, was now seen at the same spaces desperately trying to salvage supposed social relevancy. She attempted to host a family image rehabilitation brunch in a hotel, inviting media, but attendance was sparse. Invitations leaked that the guest list included friends who know the truth. The irony was thick. The same woman who once dismissed Adanna was now trying to reclaim perceived power through association with those who had built real legacies without theatrics. Rena tried an apology tour, but it didn't feel sincere. "I've struggled," she said on a local morning show, eyes doe-like. "People think I've been perfect, but I've made mistakes. Family dynamics are complicated." The audience reception was lukewarm. Her credibility had been chipped away by pattern recognition, too many stage narratives, too little genuine ownership. The public humiliation reached a deeper layer when a leaked audio surfaced, a recording of Rena talking to an influencer about maintaining the pregnancy narrative despite knowing it was false. "It keeps him close," she'd said, "and gives Mama Kimi something to brag about." The backlash was swift. People began using the term performative empathy to describe her. Adanna's name, in contrast, was associated with quiet integrity, a narrative built not on sensational shocks, but on trust. Adanna, though carefully distant, watched the fallout. She didn't gloat. She understood the fragility of public perception. It could elevate or destroy. She used the moment to subtly amplify her mentorship program, offering workshops to women in transition, inviting the ones who were watching Rena's collapse to see real sustainability in action. The contrast was subtle but visible, one woman flailing under the weight of constructed identity, the other building ecosystems that carried others. The day Adanna stepped into her old house for the first time since eviction felt like walking through a shrine of ghosts. The gates were still hers, now untarnished by false names, and the compound, despite the new chaos outside, held the residue of memory. She didn't bring a camera crew. She brought a small notebook, a designer from her team, and silence. The front door creaked. The foyer still smelled faintly of the jasmine that once bloomed by the window. The pictures on the wall had been replaced with new ones of Rena's styled moments. The mirrors had fingerprints from frantic touch-ups, and in the master bedroom, faint makeup smears lingered on the vanity, a reminder of the woman who had tried to wear someone else's crown. Adanna walked slowly through each room. Her footsteps were soft, not to disturb, but to feel. She paused by the living room window, looking out at the courtyard where the eviction showdown had gone viral weeks before. Sunlight slanted across the floor in the same way it had when she had first dreamed of building, but now she was the one who owned the light. A contractor approached her hesitantly. "You're not here to make a scene?" he asked, voice low. "No," she said. "I'm here to understand what the space held and what it still can." She turned to the designer beside her. "There's a way to preserve these traces. They are part of the story, not to glorify pain, but to show the beginning was necessary for what's next." They moved into the study. The old family photos had been replaced with staged images of a new era. The library shelves were partially empty, except for a few designer coffee table books. Adanna opened one. Her old design school notebook had been hidden behind a decoy. It had sketches of the very concepts that had now become the prototype's heart. She smiled reflexively, running a finger over the thin lines of a drawing titled Empowered Haven. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had taken the fragments of her passion, been discarded, and then used that very passion to reclaim what had been stolen. She didn't stay long. She left the house with laid intention. The tour wasn't for public spectacle, it was for herself. To mark the closing of a door that had once been a cage, and to give herself permission to move fully into a life where she no longer had to hide her strength behind silence. Back at the prototype, she added a memorial corner, 3 glass panels etched with phrases about beginnings, betrayal, and the quiet power of rising. It became one of the most visited spots, not because it was dramatic, but because people felt seen when they stood there. The man who once commanded boardrooms now stared at the ceiling of a holding cell, fluorescent light casting harsh bars across his face. Kola Okafor's fall hadn't been sudden. It had been a slow unraveling stitched together by greed, negligence, and the illusion that appearances could cover structural rot. The fraud investigation had grown teeth. Evidence of manipulated accounts, offshore shell corporations, and coerced signatures had finally been enough for the authorities to act. He'd always believed he could bend systems to his advantage. Now the system bent back. News of his arrest spread like wildfire. It wasn't just the charges that stung. It was the image of him, once the youthful titan of finance, being led out in handcuffs, his tailored suit replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit. The public watched the transformation from polished boss to a man forced to face everything he had buried beneath charm. Adanna saw the headlines. She didn't celebrate the spectacle. Instead, she sent a quiet gesture. A legal team, through Tommy, provided him a lawyer, not to defend his past, but to ensure the proceedings followed due process. When Kola received the message, he was confused. He didn't deserve the courtesy, and yet it was extended. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a statement. She was not the one who broke. She was the one who built, even when others crumbled. Kola requested a private meeting through intermediaries. He wanted to talk, to clear up misunderstandings, to find a way back into the orbit he had once controlled. He had seen the world shift, watched his mother's influence waver, and knew the eviction was no longer just about property, it was about legacy. Adanna declined. She hadn't built a new life to drag herself into the wreckage of a man who had been content to throw her away for spectacle and convenience. His breakdown wasn't only legal, it was psychological. He was haunted by the silence she held. There was no public revenge, no smear campaign from her side. That absence was more unbearable than the courtroom hearings. He had become a background character in his own life while watching her narrative dominate discourse with purpose. Behind bars, he had time to replay his decisions. The envelope he once gave her, 50000 folded like an afterthought, showed up in memory like a scar. He attempted to leak a story framing himself as a victim of corporate sabotage, but no one believed the man who had built his empire on opacity. The media that had once fawned over him now used his past arrogance as a cautionary tale. Interviews with former associates painted him as a man who chose image over integrity. Mima Kimi visited him. She sat across a small plastic table, her expression a tangle of denial and vulnerability. "We can fix this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Your story isn't over." Kola looked at her with fatigue dripping from his eyes. "I built a glass house, and I threw the stones myself," he murmured. The bravado that once filled rooms had evaporated, replaced by rawness. He had expected silence to be weakness from Adanna. He didn't understand that silence could be chosen power, an absence that spoke louder than any scream. Adanna's empire was no longer a single prototype. The momentum from the first property had become a ripple, then a tide. She bought 2 neighboring lots quietly, spaces that had previously been condemned or left in bureaucratic limbo. Instead of bulldozing them into generic high-rises, she kept the soul of each location, integrating them into a sister vision of her original model. The first became an extension of women-centered housing, offering rent-free units to women escaping abusive marriages or financial exploitation. The second was a dedicated co-work hub, open exclusively to female entrepreneurs, creatives, and community leaders. It wasn't charity wrapped in patronage. It was infrastructure built from lived experience, where mentorship was baked into the design and collaboration happened organically over shared coffee tables and vertical gardens. The public saw the move, but the full weight of what she was doing wasn't captured in clickbait. Headlines said, "Silent Thunder builds women-first community." What the headlines missed was the subtlety, the women who moved and didn't pose for promotional photos. They showed up early with laptops, proposals, and quiet gratitude. They were building their own stories inside her framework. At the soft inaugural event, there was no red carpet, just a simple gathering with carefully curated lighting, speeches from women whose lives had been impacted, and a moment of silence she asked for at the beginning. "We're not here to celebrate a single victory," she said. "We're here to recognize what happens when someone chooses the long work over the short spectacle. This isn't about me. It's about what happens when the dispossessed are given space to create again." Tommy stood at the edge, watching. "You could have made it about headlines," he whispered. "You made it about legacy." She smiled. "They'll remember the headlines. We'll live in the legacy." Then she took a walk through the co-work space, stopping at a small mentorship corner where a young woman was sketching a pitch deck. Adanna sat, pulled out a notepad, and offered a suggestion. Small, practical, but meaningful. The woman looked up, eyes wide, then nodded. Uche appeared almost unannounced. He had learned the value of quiet celebration. He didn't take the stage. He let the women speak, and when the time came, he stood behind Adanna, offering support without stealing light. Later, in private, he said, "You didn't need to bulldoze the old narratives. You built around them. That's why they hold." She placed a hand over the building's blueprint, now layered with hand-drawn notes from residents, mentors, and community leaders. The silent thunder had become a network of echoes. Each success reverberated into someone else's beginning. Pride, once armor, had become a cage for Mama Kimi. Her social currency had evaporated into thin, performative apologies. Invitations that once flowed were now scarce. The gossip cycles no longer carried her proclamations with eager reverence. The world had watched her choose spectacle over substance, and the consequences had followed. She came to Adanna's office, not in a storm of accusations, but quietly, with eyes swollen from crying and a trembling hand clutching an old family photograph. The receptionist, who had once been instructed to direct any family business elsewhere, hesitated, then escorted her in. Adanna was in a meeting. She excused herself with grace and motioned for Mama Kimi to sit. There was no fanfare. The room held sun through frosted glass, and the air smelled faintly of bergamot, Adanna's choice, a subtle reminder of calm. "I was wrong," Mama Kimi said immediately, voice thin. "I saw what I wanted to see. I didn't listen to the parts that felt uncomfortable. I thought I was helping my family. I was wrong." Adanna, still poised, let her speak. There was no interruption, no cutting, just observation. "I didn't come to beg," Mama Kimi continued. "I came to ask. You could have destroyed me. You didn't. I want to know, can I be part of something again? I want to help. I want to make right what I helped break." Adanna looked at her, not with joy, not with vengeance, but with clarity. "You were always the daughter I needed," Mama Kimi said, eyes glistening. "But you were too blind to see me." Adanna sighed, then stood. "You may leave," she said softly. "This isn't a door that's closed forever. It's one you locked yourself out of. If you want to start, do it quietly. Help the women who were hurt. Don't come for optics. Come for the work." Mama Kimi's shoulders slumped. The handshake she extended was hesitant. Adanna took it. Her grip was firm, not warm, but honest. "I'll be watching," Mama Kimi whispered. "Then watch something that builds," Adanna replied. Mama Kimi left, not with the same swagger, but with a new weight in her step, one that carried accountability instead of entitlement. Uche's proposal wasn't in the form of roses, diamonds, or public spectacle. It arrived in an unassuming envelope, delivered to her office on a rainy Lagos afternoon. She opened it while sitting in the mentorship lounge, watching two women collaborate over a draft contract. Inside was a deed, an official transfer granting her full ownership of the design fame they had built together, complete with the legal language of partnership, equal decision-making, and a note. "I don't want to own you. I want to build with you." She looked up as Uche stepped into the room, rain still dripping from his coat. He didn't kneel. He didn't speak grandly. He simply said, "You've been giving the world spaces that last. I want to be in every room you design, not as owner, but as co-builder." It was a moment without cameras. It didn't need them. She closed the envelope, placed her hand over the paper, then placed her other hand in his. "Then let's build the next chapter," she replied. They forged a quiet partnership, not a romanticized headline, but a strategic alliance rooted in mutual respect. The firm's new name reflected both their contributions, yet the public narrative remained focused on the community she was growing. The proposal, the deed, the shared vision became the foundation for a deeper partnership, one where power and love weren't transactional, but co-authored. From her penthouse balcony, Adanna watched the city spread beneath her like a living, pulsing map of what had once been impossible. Her old house appeared in the distance, small now, quiet in comparison, with Rena and Mama Kimi walking down the street, their heads down, ignored by the same people who once accosted Adanna with whispers and judgment. The contrast was gentle, not cruel. It was the silence of someone who had already won and chose compassion over spectacle. She sipped tea, the taste of bergamot swirling like memory. Her reflection in the glass overlapped with the shimmering skyline. The final window, the one she'd designed to frame a view of both the past and the future, showed her that everything had come full circle. The woman who had been tossed out with an envelope now inhabited the rare air of legacy, the kind that grew roots while others chased shadows. Her phone buzzed. A message from a woman who had just signed on to mentor others read, "Because of you, we're finally building a line of succession that doesn't require apologies." She typed back a simple, "Keep the windows open." Below, the new co-work hub's lights glowed like constellations, each one a story, each one a quiet victory. The eviction, the breakdowns, the public spectacle had become the prelude. The true story was the ecosystem she had grown, women who lifted other women, partnerships that prioritized integrity, spaces that honored history but weren't trapped by it. She leaned forward, looking out the final window. In the distance, the old compound's gate, no longer gaudy, no longer symbolic of someone else's temporary reign, stood solid. She smiled, not because of revenge served, but because of peace earned. The end.